Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Riding a Wave. I am Mark Healy. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Wave, Rockaway's newspaper since 1893. And joining me today, he was the very first guest on Riding the Wave back in 2014. And that's former Assemblyman Phil Goldfeder. Hey, Phil, welcome to the show today, buddy.
Hey, Mark, it is so amazing to be back. Again, to see the progress from that first show. I remember doing it in this dark, sandy, destroyed room to where we are today. It is just amazing to be back. It's amazing to see you. It's amazing to see Rockaway, even through the pandemic, continue to sort of stick together and rise. So amazing, everything that you do and the Wave does to keep the community informed and keep everybody's energy and spirits up as much as possible.
Well, I appreciate that, Phil. Of course, you're missed. You always were someone that we could count on here at the Wave, to be on top of issues. You're always so accessible, not only to us, but certainly your stakeholders and the constituents here in Rockaway. And, that's why I always say, whenever you delve in, whenever you dive into an issue, even now that you've been removed from office for a few years, you're still, your word still carries a lot of weight around here. I think it's because of that consistent commitment that you had as an Assemblyman. So that's why I wanted to have you on today, because I was surprised by your endorsement the other day of Scott Stringer running for mayor. But before we get into that, and that's why I wanted to have you on today, before we get into that, I do want people, because people always ask me, what's Phil up to? Is he going to run for office? Is he ever going to come back and save us or help us? So what are you up to? And A, what are you up to? And B, please give my best to Esther and the children, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I have to be careful they don't hear talk of potentially maybe running for office again. And as I said back in 2016, when I quote unquote retired, I don't rule out anything. For me, it's about enjoying what you do. And Mark, my dedication to public service knows no bounds. I mean, the opportunity to interact with civic leaders and community groups and great media outlets. I mean, it's just something that I have a passion for. And so who knows? I'm having a really good time. When I left office, I said I'm always going to look for ways to give back. Today, I run the public affairs department at a community bank in New Jersey called Cross River. Now, just to put that in, give you some context, right? Most people have never heard of Cross River, but Cross River is a very large bank when it comes to financial technology. And we power a lot of the companies that you interact with online. But specifically in the last year, in the pandemic, a lot of the small business owners who are listening to this know of a certain government program called the Paycheck Protection Program. And what Cross River did was used our technology, and we've actually been one of the largest bank lenders in the entire country. And so when I talk about continuation of public service, it's wherever I go, I'm looking for ways to try and help, communities that are struggling. And I always, people know I'm a religious person, and I always say, God doesn't put you in a situation that you can't handle. And I know that after Sandy, being in the middle of Rockaway, having my own house destroyed, I was in the right place at the right time, right? And I find myself now at a community bank. And you say to yourself, okay, I'm at a community bank and I'm working in this world. And all of a sudden, the pandemic hits and the government is looking for partners to help make these loans to small businesses. And all of a sudden, once again, I'm thrust right in the front of it to say, how can us as a community bank that understands technology make these loans? And that's what we've done. And it's amazing. I mean, we've gotten sort of great reviews from the White House and the Small Business Administration, who've been very just happy with the work that we've done and making sure that we're finding ways to fund not just the biggest businesses, right, but mom and pop shops all across Rockaway. I take a personal pride when I look through some of the data and I'm troubleshooting some of the issues, and I see a business on 129th Street or I see something, on Mott Avenue, and it's sort of a personal pride to be able to sort of find ways to give back to small businesses across the country. But obviously, I've never forgotten where I came from and what I'm trying to support.
Well, certainly it's places like yours that have helped, places like Rockaway, be resilient during this time. I mean, it's just amazing. I'm never surprised by the resilience of this community, but the pandemic definitely tested everyone's will. When you think about Sandy and you think about how people got through that, they got through it because they were hand in hand and side by side, and there was a lot of hugging and there was a lot of kissing, and and when this pandemic hit, like all that went out the window. So just think about trying to be united when you can't touch anybody and you can't be near them and you can't gather. I think that is really such a, what was the, that real, I always talk about Sisyphus rolling, boulder up the hill. I mean, like, it seems like Rockaway always gets, but this wasn't a Rockaway problem. It was an everywhere.
No, it was a world problem. I mean, but you just, Mark, talking to you, I mean, it's been a while since, and you and I talk and we text all the time, but talking to you now, literally, and hearing you say certain things, it just gives me the chills, right? I can't, people in Rockaway, people in Southern Queens, they know it wasn't, we weren't doing a job just for the sake of doing a job. Right. When me and my team, and I, sort of thinking now about my team, we did it because we loved what we did. We loved our community. We loved Rockaway. We loved Southern Queens. We loved service. And so it was not a job. It was not something, oh, we have to do it. We jumped into it every day and sort of just, I mean, hearing you talk about our time after Sandy, it's so funny because when most people talk about Sandy, it's like depressing and it's sad. Right. You can see for both of us, it kind of brings a smile to our face, right? Now, not because we're happy, right? Because like you remember the best parts of it, right?
Exactly. Well, and that's why this place is an inspiring place. Even with all of the, the day-to-day stress and the day-to-day challenges, that you have to deal with. It's just, this is what this place is. They just say, bring it, and we'll take it head on. All right, so the nicety portion of the program is over. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, so this week, I decided to make my editorial, which is always on page 4. I don't know if you see the cartoon, The Gift Horse in the Mouth by the great Thomas Kerr with Scott Stringer on the horse. And look, as I wrote in the editorial, I was a little surprised to see that you were endorsing Scott Stringer, not because, because let's be honest, 2 years ago, the wave probably would have been right there with you, endorsing Scott. I happen to like Scott personally, and I'm not endorsing him. That's not why I wrote this editorial. But like I texted you, as soon as I read the email from Stringer's campaign, I texted you immediately. I'm like, Scott Stringer, really? So, and you said specifically, right to the point, he's the right man for the job. Okay, so before I get to my my negativity, as I'm told, why don't you tell me and tell our readers why Scott is the best man for Rockaway to be mayor of New York City?
So as everybody in Rockaway knows, for me, I put politics aside in everything, right? And Mark, as you know, from the day I entered office, even though when I ran for office the first time, me and Councilman Ulrich were on opposing sides, the day after I was elected or the week after I was elected, him and I came together, we went out for lunch, and through my time in office, I probably had no bigger ally than Councilman Eric Ulrich. And now many people across the city and across the state, when I would go to Albany, say, Phil, why are you talking, why are you working so closely with that Republican? Or why are you working so closely with this person? And for me, it was always about pragmatic politics, right? Like, how do we actually get things done? Because after Sandy, it didn't matter if you were a Democrat, it didn't matter if you were a Republican. If you were willing to help, we were willing to take it. And I can tell you that when I first got elected, and sort of, I had a lot of mentors throughout my career. When I first got elected, one of the first events I went to, I really kind of didn't know, newly elected, like, what do I do? Right? Where do I go? Like, where are the bathrooms, right? And Scott Stringer at the time, who is somebody who I had known, who, I knew peripherally, but now I was a, young, newly elected official. And he came over to me. He kind of sought me out in this big room of people, and he sought me out, and he says, oh, congratulations. I didn't have a chance to call, but I wanted to say congratulations on the win, and I'm really looking forward to working with you. And I said to him, I said, look, you've been in public office for a long time. You were in the assembly, if you can, like, I'd love some guidance. I'd love some advice. We proceeded for the next, literally, the event kind of went on. Him and I sat in a corner for a half an hour. And he walked me through what to expect. And he walked me through, how things work. And I think the one thing that I still remember today, he says, most people after they get elected, they think they could just, okay, the hard part's over, the campaign is over. He goes, let me tell you something, Phil. The hard part hasn't even begun yet, right? The idea of serving your community is not about getting elected. That's one piece. The hard part is actually serving, and not just serving for the sake of serving, as you and I just talked about, serving with a passion, with an emotion, with a desire to change the community you represent. And that is what he left me with. And for me, literally, it was one of my first events that had a very lasting impression. And that was not something that he prepared. It wasn't something that wasn't a PowerPoint presentation on how to be a good elected official. It was a guy who was already fairly successful. For me, it was a young up and comer. And he gave me that guidance and that advice. And it was something that he was talking to me from the heart. And so when you get to know your elected officials, it's not always about their political ideology. And it's not always about every political stance on every issue. It's about what's in their heart and their soul. I mean, I remember when I chose to run, a community leader said to me, Phil, do you have a fire in your belly? And I didn't actually know what that meant. A fire in my belly? Yeah, I want to run. I want to be, I want to help the community. Scott, right after I got elected, he sort of showed me in that conversation, sort of he had a fire in his belly. And that was just the beginning, right? Because, him and I sort of worked together on a lot of different issues, especially as controller after Sandy. We did multiple town halls. We went door to door, going from business to business, with finding new ways to help. As the controller, obviously, he had a big part of Sandy recovery. And as you said, up until a few years ago, this is not personal, up until a few years ago, you actually kind of recognized that he was a good guy and he was out and about. And I can't, look, I can't speak to every position and to everything he's done. I can tell you that when I needed help for Rockaway, when I needed help as an elected official representing Southern Queens, Scott was there for me. I know that he has that fire in his belly. And I know that the day he's elected, it's not about understanding and learning how to get the job done. He's going to actually start to work and get the job done.
Well, and just so you were clear, it's not about his politics. It's not about his ideology. Every candidate that we have in here, either here in the Wave studio or out on the street or via Zoom, it's always about what is the effect going to be for Rockaway? What is going to be now? Like here's the difference about why this time I'm a little concerned about Scott, and it's not because, and it's not so much me. It's we as listening to our readers, listening to people who are getting involved in this process, because here's an opportunity to turn around the last 8 years with Bill de Blasio. Who's been easily the worst mayor on the, in the only person that comes close is John Lindsay, at least in my, and you were someone that you were always willing to, take on the fight, when people, even if you weren't necessarily on board with what the actual issue was, you were always someone that was going to listen. You were always someone that was going to try to find a bridge to build, okay? And I think Scott certainly has that ability. But I have three main issues. And, again, you don't have to necessarily answer to them, but I'm just going to, I didn't want to just do this via text. I didn't want to just do it on the phone. And because you are who you are and what you mean to this community, your words have weight. And if you remember, we were like this when you endorsed Stacey Fefermato.
Right.
And I was not sure. And I was like, really? And Stacey, come on, just because she's Audrey's daughter, and you were like, hold on a second, she's going to do a great job. And we had that conversation, and you were right about Stacey. Stacey is a fighter. She has done a great job. Yeah. She doesn't love everything I write, and I don't love every position that she takes, but I know that Stacey is going to represent Rockaway the best she can in the state assembly, and she's done a great job. So you were right. I know you love to hear that.
I love it. Love it. Especially from you, because I know it means something.
Oh God, it's so hard. But and really, these are our issues. And again, it's not just my issue.
No, go ahead.
Number one, and you remember this because you were still in office, when the famous memo that Mitchell Silver, who's just resigned as New York City Parks Commissioner, when everybody started to find out that the allocation from FEMA for the boardwalk reconstruction was going to be double. It was going to be 480 million. He wrote that infamous memo to the mayor saying, you know, if Rockaway finds out that you're going to have all this money, it's going to be a political liability for you, because they're going to expect all that money that FEMA gave us for the boardwalk to go to the boardwalk. Shockingly, we would expect that. And, you know, Eric Ulrich, as councilman, you know, demanded or asked, he didn't demand, he asked Scott for an audit of that FEMA allocation. And we're still waiting for it. We never got it. You know, I understand that some of the monies are still being allocated, but we never got it. And I've been asking for it for I don't know how long. And I know Eric has as well. So to me, that was may have went a long way into not getting, you know, Bill de Blasio reelected, you know, 3.5 years ago. So who knows? The second thing was he talked tough during the process of this shelter being opened up on 101st Street and was really part of the process. And then all of a sudden, he got outfoxed by Bill de Blasio, of all people. And they were able to open up this males-only shelter in the middle of not only a residential area on Beach 101, but within walking distance of 8 schools, a males-only shelter, which is a dicey proposition. And while they were open, pandemic was the only thing that shut it down. While they were open, there were more than a few incidents that had happened in the neighborhood. And lastly, and this is the thing I think he's going to have the biggest problem with.
I'm just taking notes here so I can come back on it.
Yes, please. And the last thing, he endorsed Bill de Blasio. I mean, I just can't, like, I don't know. Let's say Scott comes on the Zoom or comes to the Wave. I mean, that's going to be the first question I asked him. How could you endorse this guy? I mean, he's just awful. And, you know, there wasn't a war going on. There wasn't any, like, you know, he has to finish the job he started. There's none of that rhetoric. He's just awful. So I think that those 3 things have been the biggest issues that folks have been discussing with me. And I think that last one may be the hardest one. I mean, did you endorse Bill de Blasio when you ran?
I did not. I most certainly did not. No, I don't even know where to, I don't even know where to start with that. Let's sort of start with the endorsement. I mean, sort of the mayor's race 3 years ago now, or 3.5 years ago now. Look, the de Blasio, there's no question that de Blasio and Mayor de Blasio was a successful mayor that sort of, but he had, there was not a lot of folks who were lining up to really put a challenge forward, right? In a real way, in a pragmatic way, right? And I think, and again, I can't speak to Scott's politics then or what was happening in the city then or sort of what the situation was. But unfortunately, right, let's take a look at ultimately what happened. Bill de Blasio was reelected pretty like significantly, right?
With 25% of the vote. I mean, let's be honest.
Okay,
25% of the electorate showed up.
Mark, take a look at, I mean, I hate to say this, right? You take a look at our recent city council election in the 31st. I mean, and by the way, a great opportunity to say congratulations to Sylvina Brooks. She is a friend that literally, her and I go back to the earliest days as political staffers. I am so excited. She is going to be amazing for the 31st. But you can't talk about turnout in one race and not recognize as an entire city and state, we have a problem with voter turnout. And I think we're making a lot of progress. I give a lot of credit to Stacy and some of the voting reforms to try and early voting and other systems to try and increase voter turnout. But put that aside. I mean, look, de Blasio pulled the wool over a lot of folks, right? I mean, you talk about the shelter, right? And de Blasio outwit. I mean, throughout this administration, you'd be hard pressed to find an issue where he didn't stumble, but somehow still managed to sort of survive. I quite frankly, I don't get it. I mean, you read the papers and going back to the earliest, if you remember Flight 587, the memorial, one of those first ones where not only was he late, but if I recall, he ended up taking a boat or he took there was like the whole story just got worse and worse. And you expected kind of the facade of Mayor de Blasio at some point to kind of fall. And it didn't. And I I say that as, again, not from a, it's not, I want to be very clear to anybody who's listening to this. This is not about political ideology. It's not because, oh, he's too liberal for me or not. No, it's quite the opposite. I don't care if you're a liberal or conservative. If you're able to get the job done, God bless. I will support you. I will stand up for you. And I will do whatever it takes to help you do that. And I think that Bill de Blasio found a way sort of throughout his administration to continue to kind of squeak things out and squeak down the line. And I can't speak to the endorsement, but I can tell you that if Scott sort of was endorsing him, there was a calculus because it was in the best interest of the city of New York to find a way to get things done. And unfortunately, sometimes you see the writing on the wall. Bill de Blasio is going to get elected. I need to find a way to work with him, in the beginning of his next term. I need to find a way to get things done. But I'll go back to sort of the first term. I mean, there are a lot of instances where Scott stood arm in arm with us on so many issues, right? Even against sort of Bill de Blasio. And I mean, you take a look at the last 2 years. You talk specifically about sort of the criticism of the last 2 years. There has been nobody who's been more critical of Bill de Blasio over the last 2 to 3 years than Scott Stringer, right? He has been critical with using every sort of resource his office has to hold Bill de Blasio accountable. And I think, again, politics, as they say, makes strange bedfellows sometimes. And I think, like I said, going back to the reason why I'm such a Scott fan is he's a pragmatic guy. And at the time, I think in the effort to serve New Yorkers, he felt it was important to endorse Bill de Blasio. But when it came time to be critical, I think he's done that. When it comes to the shelter, look, I remember, I sat in a meeting and every elected official sat there. It was me and Congressman Meeks and Councilman Ulrich and Senator Adabo. And we talked with the mayor at the time about a shelter in Far Rockaway.
Right.
And we were outraged, if you remember, right?
I do.
And everybody said, you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. Don't even bother. The shelter's coming, just embrace it. And we ultimately beat it back and we won, and the shelter did not happen. And at that meeting, the mayor said to us, like, don't worry, guys, like, we recognize the specific challenges of Rockaway. We understand the specific challenges of the transportation, of the economy, of Rockaway, as Mark, you have written so many times, Rockaway overburdening the entire city's share of everything. And I don't want to get into specifics or start to go down that rabbit hole, but Rockaway had done its fair share. And Bill de Blasio at the time said, Rockaway won't have to worry. Like, if we're even thinking about doing something like this again, we're going to engage you and figure out the best way to do it. And obviously that didn't hold, right? It didn't take very long for him to once again propose a shelter. And even if he wasn't proposing a shelter, supporting hotel projects, only because ultimately the administration knew that they'd be able to change those into shelters. And so, to choose something where, Bill de Blasio kind of beat him out on this shelter, I think it was a united front from all the elected officials, including Comptroller Stringer at the time. And unfortunately, the city and the mayor won. And I think the issues of shelter is not about just Bill de Blasio. I mean, it's, and I've talked about this a number of times, and I know the Wave has reported on it. You've got to fundamentally change the way in which the system works. Continuing to build more and more shelters is not actually solving any problems. It is a Band-Aid on a broken system. And that is a fundamental flaw that Bill de Blasio hasn't addressed, that I think Mayor Stringer will ultimately address. And going right back to and you threw out a lot out at me, and so I apologize for rambling, but
Well, you didn't read the Wave yet? Come on. I thought you would have
I'm a little behind
cover to cover before you came on, Phil. Come on.
But going back, I'll look, again, when I was in office and we did a town hall in Breezy Point, and Scott Stringer had set up an entire sort of arm of his office to audit and investigate Build It Back, right? And rapid repairs and every other name of every other slapped together program that came back after Sandy. And it was Scott Stringer that kind of held not just the city to the fire to sort of make sure that the funds were actually going out, but the state and even the federal government. I mean, we stood arm in arm working with our federal elected officials to get the federal government to allocate additional funds to make sure that the funds were going in the right place. And so, look, the comptroller's office is a large bureaucracy, and there's a lot of audits and a lot of things going on. I can't speak to why one was done and why one other wasn't done, but I'm confident that Comptroller Stringer did a great job of holding the city accountable and holding the state and the feds accountable when appropriate. And I'm fairly certain that when he's mayor, he's going to do a much better job of ensuring that number one, the community has a voice. Number two is that the city is run smoothly and operationally functional, literally from day one.
Well, look, I certainly hope that, Scott has as effective a campaign team as Phil Goldfeder would be for him. And look, I welcome Scott. I'm sure he's going to be watching this at some point. I know his team will. I'm certainly connected to all of those folks on social media and know they read the wave. So I'm hoping that he appreciates, the things that you said. And look, and I have a relationship with Scott. It's not like I don't. It's just that, I would like him to come to Rockaway. If he wants Rockaway's vote, I certainly want him. I mean, Catherine Garcia has been here. We've had inquiries from Maya Wiley and Eric Adams. So certainly the folks that are running for mayor, understand that, they need to earn that vote. I think Scott knows that, but I'm hoping that he comes in and states his case as effectively as you did. So.
And I will make sure that he does. But I mean, you talk about look, two of your biggest criticisms, right? We're sort of, de Blasio tied. You talk about sort of other candidates and Catherine Garcia, who enabled, the de Blasio administration in so many ways. Maya Wiley, who literally, sort of enabled the de Blasio administration to get away with so much. And so, I think it's time that we have a pragmatic leader with an independent voice who's going to try and move the city forward. Look, your readers and the folks who are listening to this across Rockaway know that I don't say things. Look, I don't make that many endorsements, and I try.
No, you don't. You're right.
I really, really don't, because I want when I do make an endorsement, I want people of Rockaway and people of the city to know that it's coming from a place where I believe it's the right decision. I think a Mayor Stringer is going to do great things, not just for the entire city, but specifically for Rockaway, and most importantly, because I'm going to make sure of it. And I will be there right there with you, Mark, to hold him accountable. Number one, through this campaign, to ensure he's addressing the issues that are important to our community. But God willing, when he does win, to make sure that Mayor Stringer is going to be a strong advocate for all the things that we need in our community.
And that's the thing. The wave doesn't make endorsements lightly either. We don't. We haven't really made a practice of endorsing. When we do, it has to be somebody we believe in. It has to be somebody that our editorial board and the people that we talk to in the community, I want to get a sense of, if we're going to endorse someone, it has to be someone that we can get behind, because frankly, when you endorse someone and then they don't turn out to, say the things or deliver on the promises that they make to the community, you kind of own it, and I know you will. And I just really appreciate, I know you're a busy guy, and I really appreciate you making the time, Phil. Again, my best to Esther and the kids, and to your continued success over at Cross River. And, I'm always treasure our relationship and our friendship. And, it's just great to have this energy again. I know you miss it, and I definitely do.
Can you tell? You've heard me say this so many times, and I'd be remiss if I didn't sort of, Eugene and Angelica are going to watch this. And look, I was born and raised in Rockaway, and I raised my family in Rockaway, and I'm hoping that they'll raise their family in Rockaway. And that continuity will only continue to thrive if we elect people who are going to protect the future of our community. And so, I'm bringing my energy to this campaign because I'm just as passionate about it today as I was in my service 5-6 years ago. And so I'm excited to continue this. I'm excited to sort of work this campaign, and hopefully this is just the first of many more conversations you and I are going to have on this subject.
Thanks, Phil. Take it easy, my friend.
Take care, Mark.